me alongside Mr. Mark Novak today. I'm filling in for Mr. Michael Bergio.
He's absent.
Yes, he is absent, yeah.
Hope he's going to be well. His grandma's
Yeah.
not well, so good luck, Mr. Burge. But
Yeah.
into what we have to talk about today,
Yeah.
Lisa Novak.
We're going to be talking about buyer pants on fire. And just, there's a lot of speculation out there as to whether or not it's a good time to buy now or to hold off and wait for the market to drop. So this is something that we hear about a lot, right?
Heaps.
The market's going to fall. I think I'll just wait off. Okay. What if it doesn't? What if it doesn't? So, the unusual thing about the situation we find ourselves in now is that we haven't actually lived through COVID before. No one actually knows what it's going to look like on the other side. And I know there's a lot of speculation, but there always is.
Always.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's a bit of insulation around it, guys, because for people that currently own properties, they're looking at, what's happening with the market. Are they protected? Are they going to be okay? Did some research this morning on our core suburbs. So we're in the northern beaches of Sydney. Our core suburbs, particularly around our office, Dee Why, Manly, even our office suburbs itself, Narrowena, Cromer, those suburbs had a 25% growth over the last 12 months according to RP data.
It's unbelievable. I saw some of those stats. That's
It's
incredible.
massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. So, there's a little bit of fat there, but for purchasers, we've definitely seen the numbers out, hey? So I guess we're on the cold face. We're reporting what we see every single day. Often the media takes a week or so to cotton on to, what's happening in the marketplace. But
Yeah.
I can tell you now, it's actually, the inquiries are solid.
The level of inquiry, so pretty much from the Tuesday after the Easter long weekend, the level of buyer inquiry, I could confidently say tripled, maybe even quadrupled. So I think what changed was things started to get better in terms of COVID, and with that improvement came confidence in the marketplace from the buyers. And then what catapulted that confidence again with the buyers was the lifting of restrictions on open homes, Mark, here in New South Wales.
Yeah, I think people were bottled up a little bit as well. It's a bit of pent-up demand as well, I reckon.
Yeah.
Is it artificial? Is that going to taper off? Do you reckon, or reckon that's actually going to be the wind under people's wings that they needed? I don't know, but there's definitely a demand that's come back strong.
Without a doubt. It's possible it could be a bit of a sugar hit.
Yeah.
Because what's happening at the moment is people are walking around with their finances approved that maybe got approved sort of 6 or 8 weeks ago. And the banks are, from my understanding or our understanding, the banks are reevaluating about every 12 weeks at the moment, just because of so many moving parts with people and employment. So are people walking around with money that was approved pre-COVID? It's possible, but surely the banks are not that stupid that they're not then re-evaluating at the time before going unconditional on property purchases.
That's an interesting question. I don't think they've even got a choice. I think once they've issued that 90-day approval, I think they've sort of got to honour it.
Yeah.
But it's pretty interesting that their whole perception changes with these banks. Or has changed now, because if you had a loan out, a 90-day loan out to an airline pilot, I would have thought that was a pretty safe bet as a bank.
Yeah.
Airline stewardesses, things like that. But I wonder if they can retract that if it's been approved.
It's a good question to ask. But in terms of if you guys are out there and you are looking at buying property, the person that waited for the property market to actually drop is still waiting. So there's a good old-fashioned saying that says nothing's changed in the last 100 years in terms of the property market, and nothing's going to change in the next 100 years.
Is that my saying?
I don't think it's yours. You can claim it though. We'll let you claim it. But the thing is that there's no actual date in our diary as to when the property market is going to be at its lowest. And the only time buyers actually do know when the property market is at its lowest is when it started to rebound again. And you're like, damn, I missed the bottom of the market. Property now is pretty cheap. Definitely across the northern beaches, we've seen property prices come off about 5 or 10%. And I know there's speculation out there that they're going to come off by 30%. That's what economists are suggesting.
Yeah, the big four banks have come out and said, we reckon the market's going to take a hit. That's a really interesting call.
Yeah.
it's a really interesting call.
But
and
they talk Sydney White, Mark. They don't talk Northern
But
Beaches centric,
even
you know.
still, like at 2% interest rates, you know what I mean? Like at a 2% interest rate, which is what's on offer, 2.5, 3 if you're an investor.
Yeah,
Like that is just it's whatever you buy is actually really good buying.
yeah,
And I really urge people to look at that market long term. Like the long term, I know we're micromanaging by talking about how it's gone today and how it's gone this week and stuff like that, but we can't forget that when you're paying 40 grand stamp duty to get into something, when you're paying capital gains tax for an investment to get out of a property, it's not a liquid thing that you get in and out of quickly. So it really doesn't matter, because if you're going to be in it for 10 years or 20 years, you're going to make good money, odds are, if you look back the last 50 or 100 years.
It's a long-term transaction. Now, 12 or 13 years ago when we bought our property, we overpaid then.
Yeah.
But we knew that the property was right. It ticked most of the boxes. You're never going to find the property that ticks all of them, but it ticked most of the boxes. Now when you fast forward 12, 13 years ahead, you look back and think, God, that was cheap. I can't believe that's what we paid for our property. And so it's always that long-term transaction. So, you know, if you're potentially waiting to save, you know, a few $1,000s on your property purchase, you're actually also missing out on making that additional money as well.
Long term.
Yeah, long term. It's long term transaction. But the advice would be, guys, get out there and buy now, because what happens is the buyers that will come out in full force, which is what's starting to happen now, create the competition, and they push the property prices up based on the competition. If you've got 4 or 5 buyers all vying for the same property, likely you're all going to be pushing the price of that property up. So irrelevant of what's going on out there in the marketplace.
It's the same age-old sugar hit, guys. You know, like it's, you know, it's not a sugar hit. It's a permanent thing that you've actually got going. So, you know, I know all the same factors are still there, even though we've always got something. It's always like whether it's COVID, whether it's a flood, whether it's a GFC 1, whether it's a GFC 2, whether it's there's always, whether it's an election.
I think that's why real estate agents are so robust.
Yeah,
because we're always riding some wave, right? There is always something, and guess what? We just came out of a red hot market just prior to COVID. The market was roaring hot. You know, we'd list property and it would fly out the door within 48 hours for crazy prices, and you know so, you know, then you're overpaying for property. Are you overpaying for property, I guess is the question. But there is always something, Mark, as you said, always.
That whole overpaying thing, that's an age-old problem as well.
Yeah.
You know, like everyone's had that concern about overpaying for ever. You know what I mean? They've had that concern of, am I buying at the top of the market forever?
Yeah.
I've never had someone concerned that they're buying at the bottom of the market. It's just, it's just something that people always worry about. And I think,
how do you know when the bottom of the market is?
Well, that's just a hurdle. They're all hurdles that are common, really. Yeah,
that's right. So look, the advice would be get out there and buy now. That's not us suggesting that you come and snap up all the property that we have for sale, but that's just good advice. Get out there and buy now, because likely, as I said, you know, the significant increase in buyer numbers has been unbelievable. I think there's another really good point here, Mark. I was having a conversation yesterday with a buyer, and he asked me, have you seen any properties sell really cheaply? Not one. Not one single one of our properties that we've sold during this period have we sat back and thought, wow, that was an absolute bargain.
That was a steal. I should have bought it.
Nothing sold cheaply. So yes, prices were readjusted. We met the market on pricing. But you know, properties that were sitting at 1.7 million were not selling for 1.4 million. You know, we had to meet the market. As I said, property prices came off 5-10% depending on the stock. But nothing sold way below guide.
If you can do it, and definitely the numbers out there are proving that it's a resilient market. And like I was saying before, I'm just so proud that the property market has performed compared to the other asset classes. When you look at stocks, you know, stocks really took a beating over the head, and it's nice that property didn't do anything like that. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting times. But guys, get out there and buy now. As I said, you know, you've got to Not always listen to the speculation. When economists and people like that suggest property prices are going to fall by X amount, generally they're talking about Greater Sydney. They're talking about the outer areas usually, and they do get the hardest hit. There's no doubt about it.
You know what I wonder, guys? What's the motivation? What's the
With regards to
when you look at a bank saying the market's going to come back 20%, 30%, when there's 4 banks that are saying the market's going to come back, I often think, what's the motivation? These guys are businesses. They are like our motivation. I'll say outright, our motivation is to sell properties and to manage properties, right, on the northern beaches of Sydney. That's our motivation. It's pretty clear. When we make a statement like buy, that's pretty obvious as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, we want you to buy. But when the bank makes a statement of and poo-poos property prices, what's their motivation? Because they are effectively a business. Are they trying to slow down the property market? Do they want people to be more conservative in their lending? What is their motivation? I think is very, very interesting. Because they don't have the same motivation as you. They don't have the same motivation as us. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not talking in riddles, but I'm just saying that I think we really should think about when they're making statements like that. We should really think about why they're doing that. Because I know for a fact that governments and banks have a lot in common, and I think that property market can potentially rally pretty hard in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. I'm talking the property market could go crazy. It could boom. Now, if it does, because it's 2% interest rates, I think the government's sort of capped themselves that they don't want to put the rates up, the Reserve Bank rates. So they've sort of made that promise when you look at long-term bonds. So how does a government slow a market down if it starts rallying? Potentially the government could have seen some strong indicators that the property market could start rallying, and they could have had a round table meeting with banks and said, guys, we want you to lend conservatively, to be good Australians. Potentially property prices. I don't know. I just like I'm not one of those guys that's got. Always.
The other thing is just buy when it's right.
Bottom line.
Buy when it's right.
Bottom line.
Otherwise you sort of, I was speaking to someone yesterday and he's like, but my wife, she's got to get a job. And I said, but have you got your finances approved? Yes, I do. He's got no money owing on the property that he wants to sell. He's actually in a really good position to be buying property now and picking it up at a really good price. They want to have a child next year, they're getting married next year. It's like, just, buy now. This is when it works for you. That's the other thing. People get all caught up on what's going on with interest rates and property price is going to come off and property, just buy when it's right for you. If you're ripe and ready to go, buy now. If you're not ripe and ready to go, wait. That's the thing that most people actually do forget, is that if it works well for you and you want to move and you've been looking at doing this for quite some time and you've got your finances approved right now, go for it.
And I'm the worst. You kill yourself in research.
Yeah.
You just kill yourself in research.
Me.
So
I'm not a researcher.
Yeah, like I'm
a knee-jerk person.
No, I am. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you'll go on and research before you buy something, you'll make sure. There's actually probably the majority of people would over research anything that they do.
Yeah.
So you can imagine if you use your motivator of just look, if you need to do it, just do it, as opposed to is it high, is it low, is there what are the politicians saying, what are the banks saying, what's my uncle saying, what's everyone saying?
Well, that's the problem. And then so I'll give you a quick little story before we wrap up. Yesterday we were just going under contract on a property, and we were just about to exchange contracts, and the offer maker called up and said, can you just hold off? I actually want to offer $20,000 less. And I said, okay, well, the vendor's not going to be accepting that. I said, but I've spoken to a friend and they've told me that property prices are going to come off 30%, so I want to readjust my offer. And I said, that's great, but the vendor's not going to accept that. And that's the reality of it. These people that are walking around thinking that, or rather listening to what other people are saying, be careful where you get your advice from. Because all of a sudden, everybody becomes an economist. Everybody becomes a bank valuer. Everybody becomes a real estate agent, right? Yeah. Just be careful that you're not listening to the Google doctor of real estate. Ask the people that are in the know.
Yeah.
You know, I will genuinely tell people if you know, I believe that, you know, it's a great time to buy, just wait off, like there's a lot of interest around this property, you need to be quick. You know, I'll always be super honest with the advice that I'm giving to people.
You know, I think you got to be careful, guys. Does that person that's giving the advice, do they have what you want?
Yeah.
Really, really important. I know often financial.
Oh, that's huge.
Financial advisors
That's huge.
often don't have any
Yeah.
financials themselves to manage. So it's like, hang on a sec, you're going to advise me on stocks, property, investing my money, and you've got none. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think when you are taking that advice on buying property, make sure that it's a person that's esteemed and successful in property ownership. They own a property.
Yeah.
is even just a good start, rather than your three buddies that you're renting with and you're 22 years of age.
But Mark, we did that even in our own business, because the amount of people during this period that were saying, you need to be doing this, you need to shut your doors, you need to operate your business in a different way. Everyone was giving us their words of advice, and all from good places, but we chose to just listen to what the government was saying. You know, because if we chose to listen to what everyone else was saying and the speculation out there, we would have been running in 30 million different directions.
Yeah. And
yeah,
I think, look, and I guess the question you put that question is, does the government have what we want? Well, you know, I guess they're not successful enterprise or business people.
No, but it was good factual information. That was the bottom line.
And I think in those times, and what another reason we chose to follow that advice so strictly is, I think also to be good leaders, you've got to be really good followers at the right time. You know, so I think at that time we militantly followed what the government said, because I think we just simply couldn't afford to look left or right. Everyone had to march in that same direction.
Yeah,
so,
it was, and it still is, factual, non-hysterical advice. You've got to listen to somebody, and of course that was, you know, that's where we chose to get all of our information from.
Yeah.
You know, they said don't shut, so we didn't. You know, that we followed the rules intricately, and you know, look, I think for what it's worth, we've done a great job of it. We remained open and running for our landlords and for our vendors.
Yeah, so
you know, to make sure we were there.
Staff, landlords,
100%,
tenants that needed to talk with us, sellers and buyers. I think we've served everyone. Well, I know that we've served everyone, you know, exceptionally well the last 8 weeks, because we were front and centre. We weren't operating from 50 different homes. You know, 50 staff, 40 staff were in that one hub of an office, in and out all the time. Like, I think, but you know, certainly our headquarters was fully operational whole way through. Point is, I think, you know, guys, when you're getting your advice on property purchasing, that make sure that the people giving that advice have what you want, and that, you know, as in they're esteemed in property, they're esteemed in family, they're good family people. They're not just fly-by-nighters saying, oh, I know this, don't like this, don't like that.
Yeah.
You know, I know even on our social media we get, what does Tom call them? The haters?
The haters.
Trolls.
Oh, the trolls.
You know, you get your
Oh
trolls,
my God, yes.
and they're actually consistent. They're really consistent.
Yeah.
And I like it because they have a different perspective to the perspective that we have, and people need to hear that perspective. So I love a troll, and I love a comment, and I'll always respond. We don't delete them, we leave them. But if I'm going to follow advice, I'm not going to go to them.
No, that's right.
They don't have what I want. You know, they're not of that same, you know, thinking pattern.
Yeah,
Interesting.
exactly. So guys, I guess just to wrap up, the advice would be just, you know, get out there and buy. There are certainly some great buying opportunities out there. I wouldn't say cheap, but good buying opportunities out there.
Money's cheap.
Properties at a reasonable price. You know, you can still buy a nice 2-bedder for sort of around that mid to high 6s on the northern beaches.
Yeah.
And that's really good buying. You know, you're going to be paying pretty much the same amount in rent. So if you've got maybe even less in your repayments at the moment, the way interest rates are, but get out there and buy. We're always here to give you some good advice, And hopefully this morning has been of help to you guys.
And there's some good government incentives for first home buyers.
Yeah, there sure are.
It seems
Dig
like
deep and have a look.
Everyone's forgetting about them, hey?
Yeah,
They're
dig deep and
huge.
have a look.
All
All right, guys, have a good day. See
See
you,
ya.
everybody. Bye.